Distinguished members of the Board of Trustees and President of ACK, Professor Issam Zabalawi, dear guests and ACK family members, it gives me great pride to welcome you to the late Mr. Abdullah Al-Sharhan's Remembrance event. Mr. Abdullah had many acquaintances and loved ones that respect and value him. Therefore, ACK has opted at this stage to present the focus of today's gathering from the perspective of ACK. It will be a dedication from all the ACK family members. As Mr. Abdullah used to say, to all the attendees representing the ACK family and those that are related to him or have known him since the idea sparked in his mind, formulated into a vision, and then executed and developed to what it's now on its 15th anniversary today. In his Remembrance event today, our selected speakers will share their experiences and encounters with Mr. Abdullah throughout his journey to establish ACK. The speakers will be invited to the stage. We all view him as the ACK beacon of hope and role model. Our intention is not to make this event too emotional for anybody. However, we apologize if it becomes one at any point of the event. The event is to assure that his legacy will be continued, documented, and shared with the youth of Kuwait to learn from. And now, let's start with our program. ACK would like to share a small presentation and video that was developed with love and care by the ACK family to keep Mr. Abdullah's memory alive throughout the session and the future.
Technology is changing everything. That it is actually entrepreneurs who will change the world and not huge companies. These young people, they need to be able to face those challenges. The world is changing very fast and we have to prepare them for the future and not for yesterday.
واجبنا بالكلية الاسترالية ان احنا نخرج الشباب اللي محتاجة لهم مؤسسات الدولة والقطاع الخاص.
In our general strategy of the country, education comes first. project-based learning. That learning, they learn through projects. That's why it's called experiential learning. And our teachers, we are now training them to be facilitators. In the end, I want them to be mentors. That's why culture of care.
I would now like to welcome the President of the Australian College of Kuwait, Professor Issam Zabalawi, to the podium to deliver his speech.
Honorable Al-Sharhan family, Honorable Al-Badr family, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, and fellow ACK family, dear attendees, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank you for accepting our invitation for this event. We are gathered today to pay tribute and to remember our late chairman and the founder of the ACK, His Excellency, Mr. Abdullah A, by presenting glimpses from the experience of some members of the family of the ACK. I am honored and privileged to speak on this occasion, in this memorial. The college, the AC College, will long remember Abu Sakr as a founding father of such national endeavor. He will remain as the soul and the heart of the ACK for a very, very long period. For the ACK family, he was a leader with a vividly clear vision and with a noble mission, supported by a moral and ethical practices based on a gracious values spanning over integrity, diversity, excellence, and empowerment. What distinguished him was a combination of authenticity and modernity, a combination of locality and internationality. He was a coddling father. At the same time, he was a very strict mentor. The first time I met him was around the end of 2016. I was introduced to him by Dr. Saad Al-Umari. Thank you, Dr. Saad, for that. It is a meeting that I will forever cherish and look back on with pride. During our meeting, he started by talking about the role of the higher education sector in Kuwait, how we see that the role of the sector in the development of Kuwait. And of course, not just only the public sector, also the private higher education sector. Throughout our conversation, there was stretches of silence, as he was waiting for me to respond to what he has said about the sector. In fact, I grasped that, and I started talking about my vision about the higher education sector, the role of the sector from the international experience, and about the UNESCO model, and also about the European model through the Bologna process. And I mentioned the pillars of education that developed by the UNESCO, the 4 pillars of the education, of the learning process. And we added the 5th one, which is we learn to do, we learn to be, we learn to live together, and also we learn to work, to do. And then 2 other pillars being added. We learn to transform from one mode to another. And he added that we should learn to get employed. And this is a very important pillar and has been worked out here at the ACK. We prepare the students for graduations. He started talking about some concepts like lifelong learning, learning outcomes, graduate attributes, and so on. When I looked at it, he's a man very close to the 80s with the white hair, and he's talking about concepts many young professors and young presidents, they are not fully aware of these dimensions. So when I start discussing with him these aspects, he said with his charming smile, "Wonderful." This is his word. Always when he finds something of an interest for him, he says, "Wonderful." It was lately, then I realized that he was, in some way or another, he was interviewing me to see whether I can carry the responsibility as a president for the ACK. It was my first experience with a person of that age and with that diversity in knowledge. He started to talk about the CDIO. And very few people knows what is CDIO. This is conceive, design, implement, and operate. This is a very specialized subject in engineering. It's an initiative developed by the MIT. And he started to talk about this subject in very details. And then started to talk about the experiential learning. And started to talk about the PBL, project-based learning. And when I talked to him about the Aalborg model, I didn't know that he signed an agreement with Aalborg University to use that model here at the ACK. In fact, I whispered to myself, working with this person is either going to be a smooth process, a very nice process, or it's going to be difficult and very challenging. What happened after that? I have realized that working with this person is very cherishing and very useful and very, you put you in a mood of delivery. You feel that you are part of the place, part of the community, so that you are in a position to give everything to this institution. After a while, very short period, we get very close to each other. I can claim that we became friends. We had meetings here in Kuwait, in his home, and also in Beirut. In these meetings, the conversations covered very wide subjects. He enjoyed talking politics, by the way. Talking about politics, we talk about development, talk about industries, and we talked about theology also. We talked about theology. I have some experience in that, so we start talking about the theological aspects. And I can claim that I have gained his respect, and also I can gain that also as a person and as a professional. So he started to feel very close to me in that respect. We have fulfilling conversations. And we talked about the current status in Kuwait and how he foresees the coming development in Kuwait. In many occasions, his very natural response, pre-actions and reactions, I can classify him as a strategic thinker and a visionary who was modest, considerate, innovative, and a creative leader. Most significantly, this is an important thing in his character, he was a champion for those who had none, and an inspiration to all of us. So he is helping many people here at the ACK and outside the ACK. He believed that students, regardless of their high school grades, what they have achieved in the high school, and had undiscovered layers of potential. They have a latent potential. And the role of the ACK is to seep up all these potentials from inside to the surface. And at the ACK, we have to develop a conducive environment so that we can help them in order to develop that potential. So from this, he developed the motto to enable human potential within a culture of care, because he believes that we should help them. Unfortunately, today at the ACK, we have 8,000 graduates, some of them from this category. And we receive reports from the different industries in the country that they are doing very well. Those people, in the past, they used to be a burden on the country. The ACK, with his vision, we converted them to asset to the country. And this is a great value, and we really appreciate what he has done to that. He said that next to the gifted student, next to the honor student, next to the ordinary students, that we have to give a room and to give another chance. Give them another chance, he told me. Give them another chance. So we are giving them another chance. In addition, he looked at the LD students, LD people. LD means they have learning differences. So we have a group of people having learning differences. And today we have more than 100 students at the ACK with this category. And this is because of the philosophy and the vision of Mr. Abdullah Al-Sharhan. We are accommodating this number. He said, the value of a man should be seen in what he gives and not in what he is able to receive. This is a great value. Very few people believe in this. He was using everything, whether we talk about financial, administrative, personal relationships, and so on, to embody this statement. He gave everything. He gave his all to this college. He turned his vision into a national legacy. He immersed himself within the college. He took a great joy in attending student activities and in particular graduation projects. I have seen him in one of the events talking to the students and talking to the parents. And the parents, they used to thank him because he managed to bring their sons and daughters to that historical moment for them. They are becoming, productive, and they will join the human capital of this country. And he said when the parents talking to him about their enjoyment and about how they are feeling, he said, they have made my day. No, they have made my year, because this is his vision. So he is very proud of the students and what ACK has achieved, and ACK is contributing to the human capital of this country. He referred to students and the faculty and staff as his sons and daughters. In fact, when his health was deteriorating, was in Beirut, he asked me to stream the graduation ceremony so he can see the ceremony while he's sitting on his bed. And after that, after the ceremony finished, I called him. Despite that, he was very sick. I feel the enjoyment and the pleasure in his voice. And I said, well, everything went as you were planning, and everybody is passing his regards to you. They know that you are watching them. He was very pleased, especially when he has seen one of the LD students graduating on a wheelchair. He said, well, we are achieving our mission. This is our mission. This person, a few years ago, it used to be a burden on the country. Nowadays, we are making something out of him. He will contribute to this country. This is because of the vision of Mr. Abdullah Al-Sharhan. He felt responsible for the new generation. So, he decided that we have to widen the concept of social responsibility at ACK. It's not just only helping the needy people, despite the fact that we are doing that. He increased the budget for that. But he said, I want to graduate people who are socially responsible. We want the graduates to feel this responsibility, not just only the ACK. So we have 8,000 graduates in the market. They are socially responsible. This is part of the role of the ACK. We are very proud of that. And when we talk to them, they talk about social responsibility. Ladies and gentlemen, when you honor such a great man, a true legacy, you have to also honor the lady that stood firm beside him in every step of his life. Eleanor Roosevelt, she said that behind each great man, there is a great woman. We say something different. Beside each man, there is a great woman. And this woman, she is with us today. Madam Fatin Badr, thank you. ACK salute you for what you have done. You have done a great job. We are very proud of you. We are very proud of you. And I know what you have done. You have been involved in every single step in the development. And I know how much you were caring for him and also for us at the ACK. Honorable guests, the passage of time never truly heals the memory of such a great loss. But we carry on with his vision and his legacy. May God bless him and maybe rest for eternity in peace. He will be stayed as an inspiration for us all. Thank you very much.
The CQ video.
Yeah. We received a video from our international partner from Central Queensland University sharing with us this event. So please play the.
Hello, my name is Alistair Dawson, and I'm the Vice President and Senior Deputy Vice Chancellor at Central Queensland University, Australia. As a partner university for the Australia College of Kuwait, we were both saddened and shocked by the tragic passing of Mr. Abdullah Al-Sharhan, founder and chairman of ACK. Whilst we cannot be with your gathering today to celebrate the life and commemorate the loss of Mr. Abdullah, we join with you in recognising his enormous contribution to the education system within Kuwait and the Middle East generally. His contribution to the development of Kuwait is well recognised, but more importantly, his contribution to improving access to post-school education for residents of Kuwait leaves a legacy which ensures he will not be forgotten and will forever be looked upon with great respect and fondness by those whose life his work has touched. His legacy will live on in the generations of young people who will benefit from an education which might not otherwise have been available but for his deeds. We wish the family well and the wider family of ACK great success in respect of his legacy for the future in Kuwait.
I would now like to welcome Dr. Osama Jamali, ACK Board of Trustees member and advisor, to deliver his speech.
I'm not good at speeches, so it's a chat. Abdullah Sharhan, a life to be celebrated for sure. I will begin back in 1957 when two young men leave Kuwait to go to America. Mr. Muhammad Abdul Masih Rifai, Mr. Abdullah Abdul Masih Sharhan. Rifai goes to Colorado to study electrical engineering. Abdullah lands in Kansas, the sunflower state, but not that flowery, unfortunately. They're a segregationist state, and he experienced firsthand the impact of racial treatment at restaurants, at the police station, and in the classroom. He was rescued and sent to a small college called Whittier College in California, a Quaker college known for Richard Nixon's having graduated there and played a football team. And they were giving a geology course, the UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles, geology course at Whittier. So that's what he took. And after 4 years finished, he drives to New York, signs an agreement with Phillips Petroleum, which was working in Kuwait, had a contract, to drill for oil in the Wafra. So he gets to Kuwait. He already has a job. He shows up at the bus that's going to take him to the desert. There are no roads at the time. And he was the first person on the bus. Then these roughnecks, the drillers, the American drillers, come back onto the bus. Huge guys. Abdullah says, their hand is larger than my head. And the bus fills up, and they say, why don't we go? The foreman says, we're waiting for a goddamn geologist. So Abdullah says, the goddamn geologist is here, let's go. Can you imagine the impression they had where Kuwaiti was ahead of them and had this guts? He loved working with them. At the time, a geologist had to be on a rig to evaluate the rocks that's coming up, and he decides whether to continue drilling or to stop. Unfortunately, the Ministry of Electricity and Water had paid for his scholarship. They said, come, you're going to work for us. Enough of this oil. 1 week off or not week on. They said, go and look for water for us. Well, all he could find was a second-hand rig that wasn't working. He was lucky enough to find a Palestinian engineer who worked with him to put the rig together, and off they go. They went to Shagaya, and then they hit water in Rawdatain. You can imagine his happiness. He took the water and went and saw the emir, said, look, we found water, Sheikh Sabah Salim at the time. That was a really high point. Then he worked as an engineer with the ministry, and till this day we owe him for picking the right metal for the pipelines so we don't have the corrosion. And the towers, that you see, water towers. You see these mushroom water towers. Well, that was a design that was optimal for bringing the water up at night and using the gravity for it to distribute the water in the daytime. It was a whole series of mushroom towers. And then the last project was the towers of Kuwait, which you see in Sharq, overlooking Dasman Palace. That was a huge project. 10,000 cubic meters, 150 meters up, and a lot of technical problems in terms of how do you stabilize these towers on sand. Well, the design was Swedish, the construction was Yugoslav, and the piling, they had to have double piling to keep the towers stable, was Dutch. And of course, a lot of adventures in terms of placing the metal discs that you see on the tower. These are stainless steel metal discs, 41,000 of them. I mean, Abdullah could have written several books on his adventures in that period. But luckily for us, we can go around Kuwait now and say, Abdullah's there, Abdullah's there. And when you drink Rawdatain, it's Abdullah again. So he always has an impact, whatever he's doing. There was a period when he and Abdul Hamid set up a company to suggest projects, industrial projects, that use the raw material of Kuwait. And they identified several projects. Some of them are still with us, the fisheries. Some of them fell through, like the aluminum. The government would not specify a price for electricity, and the company couldn't get going without that. But his impact was always positive. From there, I'll jump to his interest in education. That was constant in his life. You can see his impact on education on the 4 children that he raised. There is an institution for evaluating children's learning capacity and teachers to train them, which is actually the former center in the whole Middle East. Their experience is being used by other countries. They train teachers, etc. He and Fatin, of course, they dedicate their life to that, and it's an ongoing success. He thought, what is the type of education Kuwait really needs? Kuwait's a small country. He says, I would like to have graduates who can work anywhere in the world. Well, this required discipline, it required accuracy, and we had in mind models like in Switzerland and Germany, the Technische Hochschule, which actually is the basis for the economic productivity and quality. So he kept that in mind. And then we had, unfortunately, the invasion, etc. He comes back, and education is foremost on his mind. He's involved with setting up the training academy for the Coast Guard, etc. Gets to know something about the Australian method of teaching, the practical methods of teaching. And then in year 2000, when the Emiri decree allowed the private sector to set up tertiary education institutions, he applied, and ACK began going. And he put in forefront that it has to contribute to society. In addition to teaching, it will have to have a social contribution. And the one thing he would, every year, remind teachers of ACK is that parents bring their children to you. They sacrifice to bring your children to you. You have a duty to treat them not as numbers, but as people who are going to evolve into productive products. And you don't just give them a piece of paper, you give them the ability to find a job. And that's very close to his heart. He always looked for methods where you can advance the teaching. He remembered that in the Academy for the Coast Guard, there was a teacher who used a little book called The 1 Minute Manager, where they sat in the Diwaniyah, and each week a chapter would be read and discussed. It's a small booklet, very useful for actually management. He brought that to ACK. He never missed a chance to improve and kept after us all the time. Abdullah's, we've mentioned his humility, we've mentioned his impact on people. That comes from a spirituality, actually, that Abdullah had. This spirituality is connecting with something beyond the 5 senses, the soul. It had to do with the heart. It had to do with intuition and how you bring that out. And that affected him. I mean, he made everybody feel special. And he was, in terms really, his honesty was beyond comparison. A contractor would come in and he'd say, look, are you sure you're not gypping yourself? You're getting everything you deserve and plus. There was no argument. He was very generous. And this is very extraordinary. In terms of social responsibility and, for instance, he was very proud of an ACK project where the students themselves made programs to take to schools with regard to smoking awareness. And he, as they're walking around the campus and he saw a smoker, would stand by him and go up to him and say, "Look, my son, look what it's done to me. Please think twice before you light up a cigarette." Abdullah, the human being, is very difficult to explain. You have to know him to experience him. Abdullah is an experience. I mean, my mind is, the things that I want to say are crowding out my mind, so many things. But a very, very special person. I'm honored to be one of his friends. I will cherish that. And what can I say? Fatin, of course, was his partner, like two peas in a pod, I say. Absolutely. He trusted her, always took her advice. They sometimes sort of bickered about it, but I think at the end, the result was something very positive. And exceptional person, Abdullah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Osama Jamali, for your speech. I would now like to welcome Dr. Fadil Khatib, Assistant Professor and the Head of the Mechanical Engineering Department, to the podium, who will be delivering a speech on behalf of Dr. Muhammad Abdul Nabi, Dean of School of Engineering, as he has a family emergency.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. It's an honor to represent the School of Engineering and its dean in commemorating Mr. Abdullah Al-Sharhan. Dr. Nabi remembers his first encounter vividly when Mr. Abdullah was greeting him and calling him Ibni, my son. In that very first meeting, Mr. Abdullah emphasized on the role of ACK in equipping the students with the necessary skills to achieve their dreams, and not treating students as numbers. Mr. Abdullah was a great man with a great vision. He envisioned ACK as a higher education institution that provides the students with the needed technical, soft skills that are much needed for the industry. As a result, School of Engineering sought the feedback from the industry and developed a curriculum that focuses on hands-on experience and special topics required for the Kuwaiti job market. School of Engineering holds a graduation exhibition towards the end of each semester, in which students showcase their graduation projects. These projects are a demonstration of the knowledge that they gain throughout their years of study. During the exhibition, Mr. Abdullah would visit each group and have a discussion with the students to stimulate further learning and research. And in some occasions, he would offer some suggestions to the students. Following up on Mr. Abdullah's vision, School of Engineering introduced the internship program, where students receive real training in the workplace. Students are supervised by a faculty member and industrial supervisor, enabling them to gain the required industrial experience. Following up on Mr. Abdullah's teaching philosophy, ACK acquired the membership of CDIO initiative, and CDIO stands for Conceive, Design, Implement, and Operate. It's worth mentioning that ACK is the only CDIO member in the region. CDIO approach goes hand in hand with the current teaching techniques and philosophy that ACK adapts, such as project-based learning and graduation projects. Through our persistence and continuous participation in the CDIO conferences and events, ACK was awarded the hosting of the regional CDIO conference to be held next year in 2021. In spring 2019, graduation exhibition, the Dean opening speech was dedicated to Mr. Abdullah's Abdullah Sharhan, and I quote, "I sincerely dedicate this event to the soul of our ACK chairman, Mr. Abdullah Sharhan, whose passing affected all deep in their hearts. I promise him that we will keep working hard to preserve ACK's core values, which he repeatedly emphasized on, enable human potential within a culture of care." Mr. Abdullah was a man of vision and passion who was dedicated to improve the future of young people and his country. May his soul rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fadi Al-Khatib. I would now like to welcome Mr. Chris Picconi, Senior Manager of Office of Vice President of Academic Affairs, to the podium to deliver his speech.
Assalamu alaikum. At the beginning of 2004, my wife Christine and myself were on the teaching staff at the Institute of TAFE Tasmania, which was one of the original auspice partners for ACK. And indeed, the chief executive for the Institute, Mr. John Smith, was a member of the Board of Trustees. And on behalf of ACK, he asked Christine, would she come to Kuwait as a consultant for 1 month to set up the student administration system. At that time, the college itself was not complete. And so Christine worked in the city office, and by coincidence, right next door to Mr. Abdullah. And on a number of occasions during that month, Mr. Abdullah called in and spoke to Christine about his vision for education in Kuwait. And in particular, his desire to give a second chance to students who might otherwise miss the opportunity for higher education. And it was his passion and it was his vision that convinced Christine to stay. And so I came and joined her. Today, I would just like to give you one example of the personal commitment that Mr. Abdullah had to the students at ACK. One of the first decisions by our incoming president, Professor Issam, in 2017 was to approve student leadership days each semester at the college. And we invited Mr. Abdullah to come and be the keynote speaker at our first leadership day. And he chose to speak on the theme of college spirit. After his address, we gave him the opportunity to leave. But he wanted to stay, and he wanted to listen to what the students had to say. And he spent the next couple of hours moving around the different discussion groups. We thought he might be in trouble with his wife, so we suggested that perhaps he might go after the discussion groups, but he wanted to stay and listen as each of the discussion groups gave their feedback to the plenary session. It was very important to Mr. Abdullah that the students saw that he was interested in each comment from every student. And he sat with his dear friend, Dr. Osama, and listened while every group gave their feedback. In the video at the start of the Remembrance today, you heard Mr. Abdullah himself say that he wanted staff to be like facilitators and mentors to the students. And so an important part of our leadership days is that staff are present in a support capacity as mentors to the students. Those who attended that leadership day were left with a number of lasting impressions of Mr. Abdullah. And the first was his deep and genuine humility. He spent more than 5 hours there because he wanted to listen to the students. In his opening address and in his closing address, he made it very clear to the students that he wanted to listen to them. Christine and I worked for and with Mr. Abdullah for 15 years. And on a number of occasions, Christine said to me that he was like a father to her. May he rest in peace.
Thank you, Mr. Chris Picconi, for your speech. I would now like to welcome Ms. Sindus Al-Haddad, Senior Manager of Human Resources, to the podium to deliver her speech.
Good afternoon. In 2004, I attended a training course for Kuwaitis who wished to pursue a career in the private sector. The program was delivered at the Australian Academy. Upon completing the training, I was offered a service agreement to work at MS, and my role was to assist with the preparation for the opening of ACK. As the calendar turned over to October 2004, like everyone else, I was caught up in all the energy and excitement as we counted down the days until the official opening of the college. I remember when we moved ACK offices to the West Mishrif campus one weekend. Mr. Abdullah himself was there to make sure that everything went smoothly and to thank us. Mr. Abdullah was unique. I'm not sure what fired up his passion to help other people, but those around him could not help but be inspired to support him. In the early years, the HR department was very small, and we were based in the executive area. However, as the college continued to grow, we needed more space, and the only area available was in the basement. At that time, I was not a manager, but Mr. Abdullah still came to see me and apologized that there was no alternative. He genuinely cared about everybody and always did his best to make sure they were happy. In this regard, he regularly asked staff about their families. With me personally, he always called me his daughter and inquired often about my children. When I told him that my son Ali had decided to study aviation at the college, Mr. Abdullah's face lit up and he started clapping. Speaking of the aviation program, I remember the night before the opening of the hangar. A number of staff, including myself, stayed back late to make sure everything was organized as a number of VIPs were going to be present. Mr. Abdullah drove to the college twice during the evening to thank us. He was always genuinely grateful to those who were committed to help him build ACK. When I was appointed as the head of the HR department, Mr. Abdullah met with me and asked that I make sure that the staff were fully supported. Until relatively recent years, Mr. Abdullah himself signed all employment contracts, and carefully examined the CVs of new staff. He required a background suited the college approach to experiential learning. Mr. Abdullah was extremely fair man, but he was also firm. He discerned that his vision would not be realized unless we recruited staff who he felt had the background to support him. Therefore, staff development was particularly important to Mr. Abdullah, as he wanted to make sure that staff received any extra training needed to better understand and fulfill the ACK vision and mission. Having known Mr. Abdullah for over 15 years, I now feel a deep personal responsibility to work with others as we continue to build his foundations. In 2014, when the college celebrated the first 10 years, Mr. Abdullah gave me an autographed copy of the ACK history. Now, it's something even more special to me. It was my great joy to work with Mr. Abdullah, and I dearly miss him. He was like a father to me and my children. May he rest in peace.
Thank you, Ms. Sindis Al-Haddad, for your speech. I would now like to welcome Mr. Omar Al-Murabi, Assistant Manager of Projects, to the podium to deliver his speech.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. September 2004, at the Sheraton Hotel, was the first time I met Mr. Abdullah and heard him say the phrase, enabling human potential within a culture of care. At that time, it didn't mean much to me. October 2004, the college opened. It soon became very clear to me that Mr. Abdullah walked the talk. I was part of the initial intake of students at ACK. And I remember during my studies, we had to choose a business concept and work on preparing its business plan, marketing plan, strategic plan, and etc. Last semester in business diploma, we had to launch our chosen business concept in the shape of a practice firm. We had to visit different ministries for licensing requirements, real estate consultants, marketing agents, and business models to try and convince them to sponsor our launch day event. As you can see in this photo, we are launching our practice firm with Mr. Abdullah on the right side and my classmate and colleague Bashar Musawi on the left side. This launch wouldn't happen without Mr. Abdullah's motivation, support, and inspiring speeches during his visits to our class. Mr. Abdullah spoke about project-based learning as a way of preparing students for what lays ahead in their careers. His vision implementation made me feel like I was already in business, especially with the business interviews we had during our studies with ministries and enterprise representatives. During my studies at ACK, I was offered a part-time job, and upon graduation, I was offered a full-time job. Later, I was promoted to the holding company, Amas Group, as a projects officer. I remember one of my early tasks was to obtain quotes related to construction project, and I felt that in order to do this properly, I needed to become familiar with AutoCAD software. ACK had taught me how to be self-sufficient, as well as resourceful. And so I took it upon myself to learn how to modify drawings using the software. I then prepared my recommendation based on quotation reviewed from various suppliers. Mr. Abdullah sat with me and listened carefully as I explained my opinion. He seemed convinced that I had done my research thoroughly. And he simply asked me, which coat do I prefer? I felt really empowered. When he trusted my judgment, even though I was still a junior staff member. Throughout my time studying at ACK, and during my working days, every time I saw Mr. Abdullah, he would call me my son. Indeed, I always felt that he treated me as if I was his son, and continuously was the father figure to everyone at ACK. He had a genuine smile that was full of kindness and humbleness. He was a very rare person. May his soul rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Omar Muraba, for your speech. I would now like to welcome Mr. Hussein Al-Haddad, Manager of Student Affairs, to the podium to deliver his speech.
Good evening. Actually, good afternoon. We all have big changes in our lives. Changes that are more or less a second chance. I was given that chance 10 years ago from a student with low academic performance who was expelled from university. I changed my life. As I am standing here today with a master's degree and a very good career. This would not have happened without a vision of a man who inspired me and inspired a large number of young individuals. I am honored to be an example of Mr. Abdullah Al-Sharhan vision to create second chances for students who may not have otherwise completed their higher education and are therefore missing out on opportunities to grow their career. Mr. Abdullah made it clear that he was personally interested in the students' professional aspiration. He deeply cared about people, especially the youth. You can feel his care and his passion when he spoke to students and even to staff. He would always address them as my son or my daughter, and his passion to help was obvious. He inspired me and inspired everyone. To be honest, he is the reason why I decided to pursue my own career in education. He showed me that education is more than just obtaining a qualification. He showed me that education is an opportunity to change people's lives. When I joined ACK as a student in 2010, it was a big change in my life, as I swapped from studying engineering to business and thrived in the new discipline. I was honored to graduate as top of my class in both diploma and bachelor degrees, and I cherish the photos taken during the graduation ceremonies of Mr. Abdullah presenting me with the trophies of my academic achievements. Without Mr. Abdullah's vision, myself and others would have missed out on all the opportunities of professional success. This loss in opportunity may not have only affected us as students, but it would have affected our families and the wider Kuwaiti community. After I graduated in 2014, I was delighted to accept a permanent position as a staff member in ACK. As a result, I had the opportunity to listen to Mr. Abdullah as he addressed us in various staff functions and college events. Whenever he spoke, you could feel the passion in his words. You could feel the passion in his words and in the way he delivered his speeches. I remember at one particular staff dinner, his speech was focused on students who missed the opportunity to learn in a supportive environment. And I will never forget him saying, "We have to take care of them." At that time, his presence and continual support was taken for granted. It now falls to us to make sure that Mr. Abdullah's vision continues as we steer ACK into the future. He always saw it as a place where students had second chances to prove themselves through an immersive education. It is a huge responsibility, but we owe it to Mr. Abdullah that we keep his vision alive and in front of us at all times. May his soul rest in peace.
Thank you, Mr. Hussein Al-Haddad, for your speech. I would now like to welcome Ms. Ali Al-Khrafi, an officer in the Institutional Excellence Department, to the podium to deliver her speech.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to talk to you about an amazing man who taught many things about this community. He worked in nine different companies that he gained experience about. These are some of the examples. In 1962, he was an assistant petroleum geologist with KOC. From 1980 to 1984, chairman and managing directors. In 1985-1986, advisor of electricity of water. At 2004, he established ACK. In 2004, CEO of Al-Matar Oil Services Holding Company. As an influencer, and he was an optimistic man, he proved himself to assist others when it was needed by students and co-workers. Mr. Abdullah was a leader who transformed many of his ideas into reality. He also gave advice about the meaning of how to achieve your goals and how to make them into value. He was a man of wisdom and visionary for the future of ACK. He was a real person who took initiative, responsibility for his actions and good deeds. As a person with many qualities, he proved himself by continuing to put a mark on what he did. He had the ability to go the extra mile and make a difference in people around him, to prove society in ways that he could better. Since the establishment of ACK, he changed a lot in his own way and made those on campus feel that there is a meaning of life and to work in a comfortable environment. To the humblest man who we will know, who believed in making a difference to the education system. He was the humblest person who was also down to earth. May God bless his soul and his legacy to be continued. I would like to thank the management of ACK for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ali Al-Khrafi, for your speech. And now I'd like to welcome the President of the Australian College of Kuwait, Professor Isam Zabalawi, to the podium.
In fact, as you know, we have 4 schools at the ACK. We have the School of Engineering, we have a School of Business, and we have a School of Aviation, and we have a School of Maritime. I know that from being close to Mr. Abdullah, the closest one to his heart is the School of Maritime. Next to that is the School of Aviation. Because we don't have a separate building for the School of Maritime, so we moved to the second one, which is the School of Aviation. And we, in the administration of the college, we have submitted a proposal to our Board of Trustees to rename the School of Aviation, in fact, the buildings for the time being, to call it Building Mr. Abdullah Sharhan for Aviation. So this is going to be announced on the 22nd of this month after the meeting of the Board of Trustees. So this is just, we thought that we would like to share this information with you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Issam Zabalawi. A small booklet will be handed today to all attendees upon exiting the auditorium. The booklet is of the compiled speeches in remembrance of Mr. Abdullah Sharhan, including memories of staff members who didn't get the chance to share their experiences in today's scheduled speeches due to time restriction. A lot of staff members showed interest to be present at the event today, but unfortunately, due to the limited space in the auditorium, we couldn't invite everyone to attend it. Also, there will be an opportunity for other members who treasured Mr. Abdullah and would like to contribute their memories and experiences with Mr. Abdullah in relation to ACK. The Australian College of Kuwait will keep an electronic copy of the booklet maintained and updated during the upcoming 8 months. Shared experiences from other ACK and non-ACK members who would like to contribute can be emailed to remembrance@ack.edu.kw by the end of June 2020. Their shared experiences will be incorporated into the electronic copy and published on the ACK website and their ACK literature by October 2020. We received a thoughtful contribution from KFAS yesterday, which will also be incorporated into another edition. Finally, I'd like to thank all the attendees, supporters, and all contributors to the Remembrance presentations, booklet, and arrangements. I also would like to remind everyone to pick up a copy of the booklet as you exit from the auditorium. Thank you again.